Welcome to Gold Derby's Meet the Experts panel. We are joined today by Rachel Fleit, director of the documentary Introducing Selma Blair for Discovery. And wow, Rachel, this is a gut punch of a project. It's very raw, it's very real. The film follows actress model Selma Blair, we all know her. It's her emotional quest to treat her multiple sclerosis. Ultimately, why did she agree to have a camera be in her face for all of these hours and days and months?
So Selma was diagnosed in 2018, and we met 9 months after her diagnosis. She was sort of resistant to the MS drugs, and it seemed as though the stem cell transplant that had been presented to her was going to be her only option to try to slow the progression of the MS flare that she was in. And she knew on some level that what she was going through was extraordinary, and she wanted to tell her story. We were introduced to each other by a photographer who she had just worked with, Casper, who's our executive producer. And we started talking, and there was an immediate bond between Selma and I. And I think she felt that I could tell her story, and she felt like, we've talked about this a lot. She was in an extremely vulnerable position. She was in a state of surrender. And she was like, I think that this might help people. There was an outpouring on social media when she came out with her diagnosis. And she saw very quickly that people were being helped by her honesty. So I think that was her inspiration. Then from there, she really became the subject. I mean, she gave her life to me. Nothing was off limits. She didn't step foot in the edit, which was extraordinary. We did finally show her a picture locked version of the film, and she had one note, which was that we had incorrectly used a photo of her mother. We actually put a photo of her aunt in by accident. So she's like, you might want to change that. But she's very much the subject of this documentary, which is very, very exciting for me.
And the way the film opens, we see Selma acting completely normal and natural and funny, but the moment the dog jumps off of her lap, that's when she starts stuttering, she starts losing focus. And it's a very revealing scene where we see just how sporadic MS can be, patient to patient. Can you talk about why you chose that moment to open the documentary?
It was so clear. A documentary is very much a collaboration between a director and an editor. And I knew that day, it was the greatest day of filmmaking in my life. We really went, we really went for it that day. And after Selma had jumped into the pool in her nightgown and revealed sort of the story in which she stopped drinking, I said, well, I'd really like to interview you, do sort of a master interview. It was going to be our first seated interview of the film that we've done together, because I was very, very committed to a verite style documentary from the start with her. But I knew that I would need these touch points in order to tell the story I wanted to tell with her. And she decided to get dressed up for her interview. And obviously we kept the cameras rolling. But I think in deciding that was the opening, it was the moment where she was, she'd put on the facade, right? Like we all in this day and age, this Instagram filter world that we live in, she'd put on her face, ultimately, her costume. She sat in her chair, and, she's powerless over her MS. And it was so quickly apparent in that moment. She'd given me such a poised interview, but the MS took over. And to me, I feel like that set the tone for the film. It was like, we're going to try to present ourselves to the world, but then these things are going to happen that we're completely powerless over. And I think that everyone identifies with that in some way, whether you have a chronic illness or you don't, or you have a disability or you're able-bodied. We all have these moments where we're trying to be a certain way to the world, but we can't. There's and she handles that with such dignity and grace throughout the film, which I think is why she's so remarkable.
Mm-hmm. The documentary is a perfect mix of entertainment and education. Like so much detail goes into describing the disease as well as the stem cell treatments. And was that one of your main goals, to educate the public about something they may not know much about? MS doesn't seem to get a lot of headlines in the media.
I knew we had an opportunity to teach people, but I like to make movies you can really feel, in your body. And, but I knew that we had to educate our audience, and we had an opportunity to educate our audience about sort of the mystery of autoimmune disease. And so in order to fully understand what Selma was going through, I felt like we had to really understand the science, but by no means did I want to make a science film. I really wanted to make a movie about how this woman was making her way through the world and in her life in this moment. But there was a key component, you had to understand what MS was. You had to understand that her immune system was attacking her brain and her spinal cord. I mean, and the symptoms are different for everyone. Like, we just don't know. I actually have an autoimmune condition. I wouldn't call it a disease, but I have no hair, and my immune system attacks my hair follicles. Like, it makes no sense, but the result is that I'm bald, and no one really knows why. And people like to say, oh, it's because of this, that, and the other thing. But I think that MS is almost a metaphor in some ways in the film, but it also allows so many people with chronic illness to feel seen. So there was a lot to explaining it that was going to be beneficial for the overall result, I think.
Mm. And, watching the movie, it almost feels like MS is this Darth Vader type villain, and Selma is the hero who's trying to conquer the bad guy. And it seems like she pulls through in the end. Can you give us any updates on what's going on with her condition today?
Well, so it's interesting you use that metaphor. I was just thinking as you said that like the villain never goes away. You just have to learn how to live with the villain. I think that's true for all of us, right? We all have our demons that like rear their ugly heads every once in a while. So I think she's living with the villain. She has good days and she has bad days. If she was here, she would tell you that she is in remission. There's no new lesions on her brain. But she still experiences the symptoms of MS. And I think that that's something really that we learn in the movie. It's like, I think the film ultimately is about the human spirit. And we have to learn to live with what we've got, right?
I'd love to talk about the title, introducing Selma Blair. Selma has been in the spotlight for years in films like Cruel Intentions and Hellboy, but in a way, it almost feels like this film is a reintroduction to Selma. What's your specific meaning for using that word introducing in the title?
Well, first of all, we all have the versions of ourselves that we've presented to the world, right? And with Selma, I felt like something we talked about all the time. In the movie, she says, I always was a supporting actress. And she also says that she didn't try very hard to be the best actress she could be. Mm. And the subtitle for the film is The Role of a Lifetime. And we talked a lot during the film about like her starring role had finally appeared and all she had to do was be herself. And I think that that's like something that, we promote, authenticity and honesty in telling her story. So to me, it's like really introducing like Selma Blair in all of her fullness, in all of her rawness and her realness and all of her humanness, the mess, the glory, the beauty, all of it, and incredible sense of humor. I feel like people didn't know sometimes how funny she was. I mean, she played great comedic roles, but this really lets her comedy shine.
I think the most emotional moments, at least for me, were the ones between Selma and her son. The way she let him cut her hair before she went to the hospital so that when she returned, he would be prepared to see his mother in a new sort of light. Can you talk about their relationship at all? Because they really steal the movie, this bond between mother and son.
I just like I don't know, the whole Selma and Arthur's relationship is encapsulated, I think, in that dodgeball scene. They're just a lot of fun. I mean, he loves her and she loves him. And, she's mom, she's also a playmate, and they have a lot of fun together. And I think the greatest part about Arthur is like he was kind of like seemingly unfazed by her condition. It just was like, well, this is my mom, and this is the way she walks, and this is the way she talks, which is a direct quote from one of our producers, Troy Nankin. But it's like kids, see what they see, but also I think that Arthur just was able to roll with it. And he we filmed, nothing was off limits in the film, but there were these certain moments where, like, Selma had Arthur coming back and forth to Chicago while she was getting treatment to have visits. The last time she went in for the actual stem cell, we decided not to have the crew there. We just filmed that on an iPhone because I wanted to give that space to them, that like sacred space, just in case something did happen. I didn't want Arthur's last moment of seeing his mom to be with like a whole crew there, which our crew was very small, but nonetheless, we were sensitive to that. So he's a really cool kid. He's a lot like his mom. He has extraordinary comedic timing, and they're just like the best duo. I'm glad it comes across in the film.
Mm-hmm. And a final question today. What is Selma's reaction to seeing the movie, or has she seen the whole thing front to back?
Yeah, we sat next to each other during the Los Angeles premiere, or in the same row. There were a couple of people between us. And it was the first time we were watching the film with an audience. And I think she feels very proud of it, I know she does. She's told me that on numerous occasions. And because she wasn't in the edit, because she was very much the subject of the film, she trusted me with telling my version of her story, and so I think there's always an adjustment in that moment, but I think she feels like she is seen. I think that's something we all really want, right? Is to feel seen. And I think she feels very seen in the film. I think she's in the like grieving the loss of her mom. So a lot of that I think is quite difficult to just be reminded of how her mom passed, and during COVID, which was such a strange time to lose a loved one. So I think the film is definitely a love letter to her mother, and it's my love letter to Selma. So that's just, I think, the most challenging part for her that I've witnessed, is just like really getting to grapple with the loss of her mom.
Well, thank you for speaking with us today, Rachel. We'll see you in a little bit at the group panel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marcus.